On a system known for classic shoot-'em-ups, there's hardly any bigger than Darius. And yes, that is how it's pronounced. It's similar to Xevious and Fazanadu, where there's an official way to pronounce it, and that way is something that no one outside of Japan would pronounce it just by looking at the title. The fact that Super Darius exists at all is a minor miracle, and it might be the best thing that Bits Laboratory ever made. Somehow the developer who was responsible for the Famicom and NES version of Ghostbusters, the truly dire FDS version of Kiki Kai Kai, and the PC Engine version of Altered Beast, was entrusted with one of the centerpiece games for the PC Engine lineup in 1990, and they managed to hit it out of the park. Darius was one of the most amazing arcade experiences of the 1980s. Originally released in 1987, just the cabinet was amazing. It was a sit-down structure that had a subwoofer built into the seat, a headphone jack so you could rock out to the tunes, and most importantly of all, a widescreen view that was made up of 3 monitors. Obviously, you couldn't put 3 CRTs side by side and have it seamless, so there was a pretty complicated setup where you were viewing the center tube directly, and then the sides of the view were reflections of monitors below it. Darius was an experience that you absolutely, positively could not replicate at home. Which is probably why it took 3 years before Super Darius came about. Now, they couldn't make the game widescreen. Even if you letterboxed it, the PC Engine's low resolution would make everything just too small to be enjoyable. But despite that, the game is really all here. Bits Laboratory just adjusted the enemy patterns so that they work on a standard 4x3 television. And you might think, well, they couldn't replicate the subwoofer effect or the arcade's awesome soundtrack, but that's where you're wrong. All of the music in Super Darius is recorded directly from the arcade machine. No word on if they use the headphone jack, but I wouldn't be surprised. And what's more, this is the first home game to support Dolby surround sound. So if you want that subwoofer effect, go for it. It'll work. You'll just have to sit on your own subwoofer. But hang on, we're not done yet with the crazy things that Bits Laboratory did here. And that's because Super Darius is in 3D. That's right, you can watch this whole video, except the B-roll inserts of the original arcade game, in 3D. You'll have to have a set of glasses that use the pull-fritch effect, something that isn't especially common. A pair with a plastic frame was available to purchase alongside Super Darius. Those glasses now go for over 10,000 yen, so they cost way more than the game. Sometimes. I'll get to it by the end of the video. The pull-fritch effect uses one very dark lens and one almost clear lens, and the brain's response to the light coming through the darker lens winds up being slower than the clear lens, which can create an illusion of depth if you're careful about your color and lighting choices. The effect works best in a dark room, so if you want to get a good look at it and you somehow have a pair of these glasses, make sure you're viewing the video full screen, get the room dark with no light except that screen, and then pause the video now until you're ready. All set? Okay, I'm just going to turn off the lights on the video here, and there you go. That's the 3D effect. If it doesn't seem to be especially strong for you, try flipping the glasses around. The original 3D glasses were made so that you could turn them over, and if you have paper ones, just bend the earpieces back the other way. Sometimes the effect is stronger in one eye than the other. The reason that you don't see a lot of pull-fritch glasses is that they tend to cause eye strain even more than anaglyphic or shutter glasses, so they fell out of favor pretty early on as people experimented with 3D, though they had a brief resurgence that Super Darius was part of in the early 90s, where people were experimenting with 3D effects on standard television screens. The Doctor Who special Dimensions in Time and an episode of Third Rock from the Sun also used this 3D effect. Alright, I'm turning the lights back on. You can still view the 3D, it's just that due to the frame, the effect won't be as strong.
That's still not the end of the technical wizardry on display in Super Darius. The game also features some really extreme parallax scrolling. Its laboratory used sprites to enhance the scrolling effects, and that can result in some background items flickering during intense moments, but they're not often, and you don't see any slowdown. It's an impressive accomplishment when they're not even using the super graphics. Yet. The arcade version of Darius had 26 zones, one for every letter of the alphabet. Obviously, that's a lot of stages for a console game, so when Bits Laboratory ported it, they had to only include 26 stages. Okay, they did have to change a few things, like including cut bosses. The arcade version's the one that ran out of memory space and had to cut content, reusing a few bosses. Well, Super Darius has 26 unique bosses. Super Darius is a technical marvel, the most astounding game seen on the PC Engine yet. But how is it as a game? Did bringing home the epic story of man versus mechanized fish change things too much? Well, no, not really. But there are compromises. Some as a result of shrinking the screen, some just due to hardware limitations. You press button 1 to drop your bombs, and button 2 to fire your missiles, which in this case are just straight ahead shots. Super Darius doesn't have auto fire when you hold the button down, so you'll likely want to flip those switches on your PC Engine controller on. You'll notice that your missile shot is very restricted in its rate of fire. That is one of the game's compromises. But it is restricted by the number of bullets on the screen. So if you want to get close to an enemy, then you can fire much more rapidly. The bomb's rate of fire never really gets up high enough that this becomes an issue. Shooting down an entire formation of enemies can net you some extra points, but what you're really looking for are the enemies that are painted a different color: red, blue, or green. Killing one of these will release an orb of that color, and these are your power-ups. Red for your forward attack, green for your bombs, and blue for the shield. As the bar increases, your weapons will become more effective, and your shield can take more hits. And if you manage to completely fill the bar, then you level up to another version of that. You'll get lasers for your forward shot, twin bombs that fire up and down, and a much stronger shield. There's not much they can do with the shield. If you get destroyed by touching just about anything or running into terrain, then these progress bars get set back to nothing. It takes a few stages to build them up, so getting hit when you're 1 or 2 blocks away from powering up is a pretty big loss. At least you revive in the same place when you're destroyed, so you're always making some progress, though if you revive in an area heavy with enemies, you might just die again and again. One positive thing is that if you've managed to fill your bar up all the way and leveled up your weapon, or shield, then you keep that powered up version after you die. You'll still have to build up the bar to strengthen it, but that's a lot less of a hurdle. When you reach the end of the stage, you get the iconic warning that a huge battleship is approaching. Of course, since Super Darius squeezes the game down to 1 screen from 3, the huge battleships aren't nearly as huge. All of the invading alien battleships are robotic versions of aquatic life. And just like any good shoot-'em-up boss, they have multiple places that you can attack and possibly disable some weapons, plus a main gun that's almost inevitably in their mouth, which doubles as their most vulnerable point. If you manage to defeat the boss, then the path before you splits, and you have to choose between going up or down. Just don't slam into the wall between the split if you reached over to take a drink at that moment. The map of Darius is basically a pyramid, and regardless of which route you take, you'll have to clear 7 stages to beat the game. A couple of the final possible stages get repeated on the path. So your final level could be Zone V, W, X, Y, or Z. Which of those zones you clear determines what ending you get. And there's a happy ending, a sad ending, a joke ending, a sequel bait ending. The biggest problem with Super Darius is that there's no way to continue the game. You get a game over and it's back to Zone A. And because of the way that they had to scale down the arcade view, it takes a lot longer to play a stage in Super Darius than it did in the original arcade version. You can make the game easier by pressing select and pushing run on controller 1 at the title screen,
After that, when you start the game, you're given your choice of difficulty. It defaults to normal, but you also have easy available, or you could crank it up to hard or professional. There's also a cheat code that lets you access a boss rush mode, just playing through all 26 bosses in order. Unfortunately, that code requires using 2 controllers, and who wants to do that? As long as they were fixing that, why does Super Darius have to be on a CD-ROM? Wouldn't a HuCard be so much more convenient? Well, let's jump ahead 6 months to September. That's when Darius Plus, the port of Darius to HuCard, was released. Now, there is some backstory here. Originally, NEC wanted to release Darius in a HuCard format. It was more accessible to their audience, and with a big release like Darius, why would you want to limit that? This laboratory even had a version running on a HuCard in July of 1989. There was just one tiny problem. HuCards were way too small for the game. Given the choice between cutting huge amounts of features or taking Darius to the CD-ROM, NEC chose the CD-ROM. They didn't want to let go of the idea of doing Darius on a HuCard. Well, in 1990, Moore's Law came to their rescue. They could affordably double the amount of storage on that HuCard. As far as I know, Darius Plus is the first 8 megabit HuCard, which would also be why it had a very expensive retail price. Now, even at 8 megabits, they had to cut a lot. Obviously, the music is no longer pre-recorded, but they also had to cut 10 of the 26 bosses. So they lost not only the new ones for Super Darius, but several that were in the arcade game. Now, it's not all bad news. They used the extra development time to make improvements. You can now continue the game by pressing select when you get a game over. The power-ups have been rearranged to make the game easier. And they added support for the Super Graphics. The Super Graphics being the enhanced version of the PC Engine that had an extra graphics chip. And by extra, I mean a second copy of the PC Engine's graphics chip. Darius Plus is one of 2 HuCards that supports both the original PC Engine and the Super Graphics. And it essentially uses the power of the Super Graphics to eliminate flickering. In fact, I'm playing the Super Graphics version right now. The changes make Darius Plus the more approachable version of the game, but you are losing a little bit with it. Like the boss rush mode. That's been completely pulled from Darius Plus. And the reason that was pulled was because it was a completely separate release, Darius Alpha. Darius Alpha was a giveaway. You could enter a contest when you purchased Darius Plus, and then for 8 weeks, they gave away 100 copies a week. So there are 800 copies of Darius Alpha out there. That has made it one of the most wildly expensive things that you can purchase for your PC Engine. And unfortunately, that raises a topic I don't want to get too deep into, but they're a big part of the PC Engine story these days, especially when it comes to the well-known and rare games, and I can't ignore them. PCE Works is a company that, if you're being generous, they make reproductions. If you're not, then they make bootlegs. And if you're feeling especially hostile, and a lot of people have a good reason to feel that way, then they make counterfeits. They use some elaborate packaging that leads some people to believe that they are authorized reprints. And it's possible that a few of their very earliest ones actually might have been. Later on, they'd make nearly exact copies of very rare games, and then sell them in a way that passed them off as the originals. And when people complained about that, they started unobtrusively adding a small version of their logo to the discs and cases. They also take fan translations, fan games, and hacks, and just publish them on their own without ever asking the creator. PCE Works has poisoned the market for a lot of high-end PC Engine games, including Darius Alpha. So if you do go looking to buy a copy of Darius Alpha, you have to exercise some extreme caution, since there's far more PCE Works copies out there than there are actual copies. Let's get back to Darius Alpha as a game. You fight your way through the bosses of Zone A through Z consecutively, and all 26 are present on this HuCard. if you manage to defeat a boss, then your bars power up a little bit. Initially it's 3 points in each of them, but later on it'll be 2 and then 1. You'll have to stay alive if you want to get powered up. Darius Alpha is the other Super Graphics Enhanced Hue card, which I guess is kind of a cheat. And just like in Darius Plus, all it does is reduce the flickering. When you defeat a boss, you go straight to the next zone boss. There's no path splitting for this one. Darius Alpha is really just oops all bosses, and it works pretty well for that. I know this is going to come as a surprise, but both Super Darius and Darius Plus were extremely well received in Japan. They are real peak PC Engine games. And yeah, it is truly a spectacular game. Between Super and Plus, I think I have to go with Super just because it has more bosses. But if you didn't have the CD-ROM, you could still have a really good time with Darius Plus. And of course, Darius Alpha is just over there doing its own thing. These games are among the best reasons to own a PC Engine. Just absolute classics in every way.